Hey, it's Jared. In this video, I'm going to compare the Apple Watch Ultra 2 Black to the Garmin Tactix 8 OLED. These are two watches that I absolutely love, but I have to choose one. And so I'm going to talk about my experiences in using both of these devices. I've been wearing them both at the same time for a couple of weeks now. And then, of course, I have a ton of experience with the Apple Watch, having owned just about every version of the Apple Watch since the very first one. And then I was also a Tactix 7 user for a long time and replaced my Tactix 7 with the new Tactix 8. And then in a recent video, compared the Tactix 8 OLED to the Tactix 8 Solar Edition. So there's just a lot there. But first, let me just kind of set the expectations of where I'm at with using both of these devices. Now, first of all, I'm a guy in my mid 40s and I'm relatively active, but I don't work out every single day and I'm not an endurance athlete. And so while I like both of these devices for a lot of the features that they provide, I can't give you like real longevity and, what people are using some of these devices for in more extreme situations. I'm going to be able to give you my experiences as a guy that's in his mid 40s who's pretty active, who wants a good piece of technology on his wrist that provides great information. And so if that's what you're looking for, you're going to relate to me really well. So first of all, let's talk about the Apple Watch Ultra. The Apple Watch Ultra in black is nothing different than last year's Apple Watch Ultra. It's the same watch, but of course you get new software every year, different updates and stuff like that on the Apple Watch. You've got the action button over on the left-hand side, which I use to start workouts, and I can easily scroll through recent workouts and start workouts. It has a check-in mode, which I really like to use when I go on runs or rides that are usually a longer distance. I like having that check-in feature so that somebody can keep tabs. My wife can easily find me and it's sending out that signal. The Apple Watch Ultra is also cellular, which the Garmin is not. And so it has an additional way for communication to take place, whether I have my phone on me or not. Now, in the past, I have had issues with the cellular usage on the Apple Watch, but I recently was able to rectify that. And so I'm going to be making a video for those of you that have had issues with the cellular on your Apple Watch. I'm going to be making a video about that soon on how I was able to get that problem fixed. But the Apple Watch is a multi-use device. It's not just a fitness device. It has lots of apps that you can install, and I don't use a lot of the apps that I have on my watch. I have a lot of them installed, but I tend to not make good use of the apps. I don't find the Apple Watch interface to be something that makes me want to spend much time using it. If I'm using the Apple Watch interface, it's because I'm starting or stopping or interacting with a workout. I'm answering a call. I might be raising my wrist and asking Siri something. There's different things that I might be using that are easy, low friction things with the Apple Watch. Otherwise, I'm probably going to grab my phone because it's just frustrating. And I actually like that frustration built in because if I want to leave my phone behind and be more distraction free, then the Apple Watch is great for that because I can remain connected and not have to have my watch on me. Now, we'll go a little bit more into specifics on the data and all of that stuff with the Apple Watch Ultra here in a moment. Let's switch over to the Garmin Tactix 8. It has a beautiful OLED display that is very bright and does a pretty decent job of managing battery life. I haven't had this watch plugged in a few days, and I'm at 68%, and it's estimating 15 days of use left. Now, I haven't been using a lot of GPS features on this watch, which definitely does decrease the battery life faster when you are doing an active workout, but this watch still has a very good battery life that lasts a long time. Now, it does have an always-on display option, but I have that turned off, and so just when I raise the watch and rotate it, the screen comes on. I have that feature enabled because it extends battery life. With the always-on display on the OLED version of this watch, it's going to run out of battery life significantly faster if you have the always-on display. Now, you still get notifications, like I've got notifications here. I swipe up, I've got quick access information. To be completely honest, I like the user interface and all of the information on the Garmin watch much better than the Apple Watch. With the Apple Watch, I have my screen here with as much information as I could fit on it. If I want a little bit more information, I could double tap with my fingers and then double tap through some cards here that gives me some information that I think I might find useful. But there isn't a lot of information here, and this isn't very customizable. So I can't add or remove specific information. It just kind of shows me what it thinks is most useful to me. I can swipe up from the bottom to get access to that again, swipe all the way to the bottom to get to my apps. I can swipe down from the top to get to my notifications. The notifications on the Apple Watch are definitely a lot easier to read than the notifications on the Garmin. And then I can hit the button on the side to get access to kind of the widgets, quick access settings and stuff like that on the watch. Over on the Garmin, I have lots of different options here. I could press and hold on this button and get to all of the different apps on the watch. So if I want to set my alarms under clocks, or I want to activate aviation weather, or I want to look at my wallet and make a mobile payment, there are lots of options, and I could just easily kind of toggle between those here on the watch. You can start a workout by pressing this button, and we have lots of activity options here, such as Track Me, Navigation, Aviation, and Workouts. These two buttons over on the left-hand side do the same thing as swiping up and down, so I can press down and I can toggle through all of this information very easily, or use the other button to toggle up and get access to those notifications. What I love about this is one swipe down and I have weather, sunset, health information, training, my calendar, stocks if I had that programmed in. I've got a compass, I've got training information, recovery mode, my last activity information, step count, heart rate, body battery, everything right here, all easily accessible. There's a ton of options here and all sorts of information that's easily available right without having to dig through your watch. Now, over on the Apple Watch, so I could set a complication to get access, like I have the activity complication here. I can tap on that and I get my rings, which is, the most important thing on an Apple Watch is your rings. And then I have some information that I find useful, but it's not that useful of information. I've got my workouts for the day down there. I've got my steps. I've got some basic information, but not a whole lot of information available to me there. Most of the additional health information is only going to be available on the phone. So there's no health app on the Apple Watch. You actually have to go to your phone to look at all the health information. There is more information available though with the newer versions of Apple Watch OS. As you can see here, we have this training information here, which is pretty much close to steady. Wasn't working out over the weekend, and so that kind of came back down. But as you stress your body with more workout, this little bar on the right hand side starts to go up towards the top to maybe signify that you need a rest day. And then we also have our Vitals information over here on the left-hand side. Now, Vitals is a newer app to the Apple Watch, and we have 4 Vitals available. On previous version of the Apple Watch Ultra, there were 5, but Apple lost one of those because of a legal battle that they're in right now. So we only have 4 Vitals that are available, and it tracks that information, and we can rotate the dial and go through those and see our training load and all of the specific vital information there. I don't find much of the information that's available on the Apple Watch useful. I have to go over to the health app on my phone in order to look at everything. On the Garmin, I have all of that information available without having to go into the Garmin app. I still often go into the Garmin app because it's not often that I'm just like, oh, I wonder what everything is, and I'm toggling through it on the watch. So even though I have all of that data here on the watch, it's not often that I'm going and looking through that. It's usually end of the day, I go into the Garmin app and I look and see, where my body battery's at, where my recovery is, and all of that stuff. And I find that information to be better and more useful on the Garmin than it is on the Apple Watch. Now, I did buy the Tactix 8 because it has aviation features, and I haven't been able to go and use the aviation features on the Tactix 8 yet. There are some improved aviation features. The screen is definitely bigger on the watch, and so there are different things that are going to make the aviation features on the Tactix 8 better than the Tactix 7. But I did use the Tactix 7 a lot, as I had that watch for, I'd say, about 2 years, and I used that watch quite a bit when I would go flying. I love being able to pull up weather and just see information easily on the watch. Even though I have apps on my iPad like ForeFlight that gives me all that information, it's nice to have that information right on your wrist, and I can have that pulled up when I'm flying and it stays on my wrist right there, so I don't have to go digging through different screens on the iPad or anything like that. Now, one annoying thing with the Garmin watch is this watch face that shows the barometer and it just says 30. This is not useful information for the barometer. The barometer is either going to read 29 or 30, and if it's any further than those, then weird things are happening in the atmosphere and you're probably not going to be flying an airplane. So having just 30 a whole number or 29 a whole number is not useful to me at all as far as the barometer goes. On the Tactix 7, it showed the full barometer readout on the watch face, and that's exactly what I want. I don't know why they have this that way. It definitely is not useful having that information set up that way. So instead, I have to go into aviation weather, and then I can see aviation weather. You can see it's 30.01, and I love having all of this available information, especially being that I have my private pilot's license. And when I'm going to go flying or preparing for a flight, I want to have all of that information easily accessible. And as far as an experience goes for that, it's definitely a better experience on the Garmin watch than it is the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch doesn't natively have any of that information. There are apps that have that information, but for me, I end up having to use several different applications to get the information that I want, and it's not as easy of a process as what Garmin has baked in here. Now, of course, Garmin actually makes avionics for airplanes, so they're quite intelligent when it comes to aviation-related features, which is one of the reasons why I like the Tactix 8. But aviation aside, let's talk about the workout experience. I have to say the Apple Watch is lacking in a lot of areas when it comes to fitness tracking. First of all, when I'm on a treadmill and I'm running, it does a really poor job of accurately tracking my distance. I'll have this watch on my right hand and I'll be using a pedometer on my foot as well, and the treadmill is measuring distance, and all devices are within a tenth of a mile of each other except the Apple Watch. I'll complete a 5K on all of my different devices, and the Apple Watch is at 2.5 miles, not even close to what everything else is. I don't know why. I did notice that on the Garmin, if you use the treadmill option and you're running on a treadmill, it tracks really accurately. If you use the indoor run option on the Garmin, it is very inaccurate. And so I think with the Apple Watch, they decided just to box all of that up into one option, whether you're on a treadmill or you're running indoors, which could be an indoor track where you're physically moving, whereas on a treadmill, you're stationary. I feel like it would track just fine if I was on an indoor track. And our gym here in town does have an indoor track, and I found the Apple Watch to be very accurate when I do an indoor run option and I'm running on an indoor track. But when I use that option on a treadmill, because there's no other option on the Apple Watch for tracking an indoor run other than the indoor run option, it's just not accurate at all. And I really wish that Apple would add a treadmill option so that that way it can more accurately track when you're on a treadmill, and then leave the indoor run option for when you're running on an indoor track. Garmin figured that out on the last version. The Tactix 7 had an option for indoor running, but it did not have a treadmill option, and it wasn't completely accurate either. It actually overestimated the distance when you're on a treadmill. But now that it has a treadmill option and an indoor running option, both of them have been extremely accurate. Another thing the Apple Watch doesn't do is give you any ability to track strength training. It just has one option for that. So if you are lifting weight, there's no way to track what you're doing on the Apple Watch except for maybe hitting the button on the side to create a split. So that way you can see maybe how many sets that you did. But that's not information that I need. I want to be able to track the workouts that I've done and the amount of weight and reps. And you can do all of that on the Garmin watch. Now, of course, you can get Apple Watch apps like Strong, which I use when I'm on this watch, but that's a third-party app. And while it is a good app, and I think it's very well developed and has great features, it's not something that's built into the Apple Watch. And so I have to switch between apps, and that just makes for kind of a confusing and frustrating process, whereas all of that is just built right into the Garmin. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, he sure seems to like the Garmin watch. Why does he keep going back to the Apple Watch? Well, there are things that the Apple Watch does that the Garmin watch just doesn't do that well. First of all, making a mobile payment on the Garmin watch is kind of a pain in the butt. You have to go into the app on the Garmin watch. You have to swipe to the card that you want to use. You have to enter the 4-digit code that you set so that you can activate that, and then you can make your mobile payment. It's a very drawn out process. And it's a last resort process. Like, I would only use this if I didn't have my phone on me and I was somewhere and needed to make a payment, which is probably never, and definitely not very often would I find myself in that situation. So Garmin Pay, just not super useful. But on the Apple Watch, all I have to do is double tap on the button. It brings up a card. Boom, I'm ready to go, because the Apple Watch is already like authenticated because it's on my wrist and I've entered the passcode once already. And so it's just good to go. Much faster process. And I find myself using Apple Pay all the time. Whereas Garmin Pay, I used it once just to see how it would work, and it was a bummer of a process, so I just haven't used it since. Now, listening to music on the Garmin watch is also not a super enjoyable experience. There are a few different apps that you can use on the Garmin watch to sync music over, but you have to choose that music beforehand and sync it over to your Garmin watch. So if you use Spotify, or there's a handful of other apps that are supported, and you have to choose all of that music while you're connected to your phone and sync all of that over to the Garmin watch, because the Garmin watch doesn't have any sort of a connection to anything. So if you're wanting to go on a run, a walk, a hike, whatever it is, and leave your phone behind, you're going to have to first sync all of that music over to your watch, and then you just have the music that you put on the watch, and that's it. Then getting into the music and using the music player is not as enjoyable of an experience as the Apple Watch. If you use AirPods or any sort of Apple device for your ears, the experience is really nice. It seamlessly switches from your phone over to the Apple Watch and then back again, or over to an iPad. It's just a great experience using AirPods. Whereas with the Garmin, you can connect any Bluetooth headphones, but the pairing process is a little bit of a pain. And I found getting them reconnected takes a little bit of time. It's not super fast like it is with the Apple Watch. And so if you find yourself listening to music quite often and you want to be able to leave your phone behind, the experience with that on the Apple Watch is going to be much better. And you can sync music over to the Apple Watch. If you don't want to have a data plan on your Apple Watch, you can definitely do that. But I find it really nice to be able to have access to all of my music on the Apple Watch, because it is connected to a data plan, and I can just start streaming that music at any time and make changes should my mood change as well. As I've mentioned a couple times already, the Apple Watch Ultra has cellular. And so if you have your cellular connected and you have your main number on your phone syncing over, so Verizon, that's called number share. I think on T-Mobile, it's called digits, and I'm not sure what it is on AT&T or maybe some of the other carriers. But there is the ability for me to leave my phone behind. And with my phone left behind, I can take calls and respond to text messages from my Apple Watch as if I had my phone with me. On the Garmin, you can answer calls, you can respond to text messages, but it requires your phone being connected to the Garmin watch over Bluetooth. And so once your Garmin watch is outside of Bluetooth range, you're not going to get any of that information over on the Garmin watch. I would absolutely love a Garmin watch like this one with cellular. To be honest, if the Garmin Watch Tactix 8 had cellular, this watch would be gone. I would not be even talking about the Apple Watch, because the feature that I use the most is being able to listen to music, being able to leave my phone behind and make and receive calls and text messages and not feel totally disconnected from the world when I'm out on a long bike ride or a longer run. And I just love being able to leave my phone behind and know that I'm not completely disconnected. With the Garmin watch, that's not possible. There are also other features, like with the Garmin watch, being able to have that live track so that someone that you care about can be watching where you're at. You're going to need a phone connection for that, because the Garmin watch it doesn't have any sort of connection so that it can send that signal. And so it's only going to work if you have your phone with you. And most of the time I do have my phone with me, so I don't want to make it sound like most of the time I'm leaving my phone behind. But when I do want to be disconnected more from the digital life, then I can do that and feel like I'm not completely disconnected when I'm using the Apple Watch. Now, let's talk about major downsides to the Apple Watch where the Garmin definitely shines. Number one is the battery life. The battery life on the Garmin is insanely good. Even with the OLED edition of the watch, I'm still getting 15 days of use, and with a little bit of GPS use in there, but I'm getting a lot of usage out of this watch without having to charge it up. I don't like having to charge up my Apple Watch every single night to top it off to make sure that I have enough charge to go through the rest of the day. Just to put things in perspective, my Apple Watch was at 100% last night when I went to bed, and right now it is at 53%, and it is almost 11 a.m. in the morning. And yes, I did a few workouts this morning. I was streaming music from the watch because it just started streaming music from the watch and I just let it continue. So it was using more battery life there. Whereas I haven't had this Garmin watch plugged into a charger in 5 days now. And when I look at the battery life, I have 67% and 14 days left on the charge. And so that's a big difference when on the Apple Watch, I only have 53%. And the Apple Watch, I know I'm going to have to charge for a lot longer tonight because I used my Apple Watch more. And I used the Garmin watch pretty much the same this morning, tracked the same workouts, and I have been tracking the same workouts on both of these devices, but the Garmin just has significantly better battery life than the Apple Watch. So let's quickly take a look at the apps. This is the health app on the iPhone, and so I have my sleep information here, vitals, steps, HRV, cardio fitness, activities, all of that stuff. And if I tap on any of these, like for example, the cardio fitness, I get these little graphs. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. It just depends. The sleep one has definitely gotten a lot better over the years and gives me some good information about my sleep. But the Garmin app is just significantly better all the way around. You can see it's synced with my watch just now. It's got my recent workouts. I have my sleep score, my body battery, activities for the week, my recent runs, my recent bike rides, and then at a glance widgets here with the heart rate, which is updating live. That's nowhere to be found on the iPhone. I can't see a live heart rate unless I am in the heart rate app on the Apple Watch and looking at it right on the screen. There's no way I could have a complication on the front of the watch, but it's not updating as accurately and as fast as this is. I also have my intensity minutes, steps, training readiness, calorie trackers here, stress, and there are a bunch more at-a-glance options that I can select and add to the home screen. Underneath health stats, I have a ton of options here, including pulse oximeter, which the Apple Watch doesn't have because, as I mentioned earlier, the Vitals app can't show it because Apple got sued, but we have that information here, as well as a variety of additional information like a respiration tracker as well, so that I can see highest and lowest in breathing throughout the day, which might not be super useful information on the daily, but it's information that's there. The Tactix 8 also has an ECG option as well, and so I can see that information here. Of course, the Apple Watch has that and has had it for a little while, but I can see all of those previous readings, which I've only done a couple of them just for the heck of it, and I can see that in more of a full screen option here as well. Garmin also allows you to connect to friends and create groups and stuff like that as well, which is just great. Of course, you could do that on the Apple Watch, but I feel like it's more individually based. You can't create groups or anything like that on the Apple Watch. You probably need a third-party application for that. So overall, the Garmin app, I think, is much better for just getting access to your information and seeing what matters most and being able to customize that screen. You can customize your screen a bit in the Health app, but you're pretty much stuck with what Apple has provided you. You could get third-party apps that can take that data and do different things with it and reconfigure that data. I definitely have looked at a lot of third-party apps, but I just want one app. I want the native app and I want it to be good. So here are my bottom line thoughts on both of these devices. The Garmin watch is definitely created by people who understand what its purpose is. This is a device for active people who want features and they want those features to work well. They also are interested in the data insights and information that the sensors that are on this watch are able to produce. Garmin understands all of that. They are a company that makes sensors and technology for aviation, for smart devices like this. They've got a variety of different things that they do, and they do it really well. As far as the Apple Watch goes, I feel like their features are there because people ask for them, but the people that are creating these features don't really understand the information that people want. This is the Apple Watch Ultra, and it's supposed to be more for the outgoing, more active person who wants that data. And the information that the Apple Watch Ultra provides just is not that great. You need third-party apps in order to parse that data and have it presented and be a little bit more useful. And then that data isn't nearly as deep as what Garmin provides just out of the gate. The Apple Watch, as I mentioned before, also has really poor battery life in comparison to the Garmin. And so if you are using this for more of an ultra endurance type of activity, there might be activities that your Apple Watch is not even going to survive, which means you would need multiple Apple Watches just to get through one thing, and you wouldn't have one long activity tracked. Whereas with the Garmin watch, you can definitely get through all day activities using GPS. Of course, that will drain the battery a lot faster, than it would. You're not going to get 15 days of GPS usage out of this watch with tracking live activities, but it's definitely going to last significantly longer than the Apple Watch. For me, though, I'm never really doing any activity that's that long. I did run a marathon last year, and I have a couple of halves that I'm going to run this year. And I know that both of these watches would more than definitely get me through those events. The Apple Watch will do a marathon. The Apple Watch will most definitely do a half, and I won't have any issues there as far as battery life goes, as long as I make sure that it's charged before I leave. So the last major difference that I'm going to touch on is the price. This is a $1,300 watch. It is very expensive. You really have to consider whether the features are worth it. Now, Garmin has a lot of additional watch options. They have the Fenix 8 that just came out. They've got the Forerunner, all sorts of different watch options. And so if you don't need one that has all of these features, which the Tactix 8 has some ballistics features, it also has some aviation features, maybe some things that you're not going to find useful. And so you would only want to go with this watch if you like the look, because if you don't need the features, you might as well save a bunch of money and go with one of the other options. Whereas the Apple Watch Ultra is $800 retail. It depends on your options, but around $799. I got this one a little bit cheaper on Amazon, so I'll make sure to link to that. I'll link to both of these watches down in the description below so you can check out current pricing. But the Apple Watch Ultra is quite a bit cheaper than the Garmin. So that's definitely something to consider is cost as well. But ultimately, I think people are going to fall into one of two camps. Either you are in the Garmin camp because you want all of the data that the Garmin watch is able to provide. It is a data-intense device, and I love it for that fact. I know that I'm not going to get that information on the Apple Watch. I'm going to have to go to my phone to get that kind of information, and that can be kind of irritating. But then you might fall into the second category, which is maybe an Apple Watch user, and you want more of an all-around digital experience. You want to be able to load a couple of apps on your screen. You want to be able to more easily use digital payments, and the cellular connectivity might be a major feature for you. So there are those things to consider when you're deciding one versus the other. Owning both of these watches is quite an expense, and definitely something that I don't plan to continue doing moving forward. Although I really love the Garmin watch, and the Garmin watch is a better all-around watch for pretty much most of what I do. The Apple Watch is what allows me to remain connected to my family when I'm out on runs or cycling, or if I decide that I just want to leave my phone behind so that I don't have the digital distraction. The Garmin watch is not going to provide that for me. And even though I would love to have the features of the Garmin watch combined with the connectivity of the Apple Watch, it's just not a world that we live in right now until Garmin either decides to add those features or until Apple gets on their developers to create some data-rich features for Apple Watch fitness. So definitely let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you more Garmin or Apple Watch inclined? I'd love to know that. And what's maybe your favorite feature or the feature that you look forward to using most on either one of these devices? I've got links in the description so that you can check out the pricing and options that are available for both of these watches. Definitely check those out in the description. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you back in another one soon. Take care.